Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Damola, and on today's tutorial we are going to be cutting and sewing these beautiful mini slit skirts that you are seeing on your screen. Right, this tutorial is actually very easy and beginner friendly, so if this sounds like something that you're interested in, please keep watching to the end of the video. And if you've not subscribed to my channel, please click on the subscribe button to join the family, and let's get right into the tutorial. So we are going to be cutting the front part of the skirt first, and to do this we are going to have our pattern paper on fold, just like you can see in the video. And the next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to draw my starting line as usual, and from my starting line I am going to measure ½ inch. This ½ inch is going to serve as the sewing allowance to join my skirt to the band. And after I was done with that, I'm going to go ahead and impute my skirt length. My skirt length is 16 inches, but I'm going to take into consideration my band height. My band height is 1.5 inches, just like you can see. So I'm going to place that 1.5 inch on the ½ inch I measured, not on my starting line. I'm going to place the 1.5 inch on the ½ inch like so, and I'm going to mark my skirt length of 16 inches. This is just me making dotted lines so I can have a straight line to connect with. And after doing that, I'm going to go ahead and label it my full length, that is my full skirt length. And after this, I'm going to go ahead and take 1 inch below my full length. This is going to serve as my hemming allowance. So I'm just going to make dotted lines and I'm going to connect it with a straight line. I'm trying to make this tutorial as simple as possible so beginners here can understand. So I'm going to go ahead and label that my hem, right? So the next thing I'm going to do now is to take in my dart of 4 inches, right? So from my center front, that is the part of the pattern paper that is folded, I'm going to go ahead and measure 4 inches in, and I'm going to measure that 4 inch from my starting line all the way to the hem of my pattern. And I'm going to be connecting the points together with a straight line. So now I'm going to come to my starting line and I'm going to take ½ inch on both sides of my dart, right? Then I am going to come to the ½ inch below my starting line. That is where I am going to take my dart length from. So I'm going to go ahead and impute 4 inches for my dart length, and I am going to connect. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to impute my waist measurement. My waist measurement is 28 inches. Divided by 4, it is 7 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and impute the 7 inches on my starting line, right? Then I'm going to replace our dart intake. We took ½ inch on both sides, that is 1 inch. So I went ahead to place 1 inch after my actual waist measurement. So now the next thing we are going to do is to impute our hip measurement. So now my hip depth is 9. I'm going to go ahead and place my tape at 1.5 inch on the ½ inch sewing allowance after the starting line, just like I did when I was taking my skirt length, right? And I'm going to go ahead and mark 9 inches. Then I'm going to go ahead and connect that with a straight line, and I'm going to label it my hip depth. And after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to go ahead and impute my hip measurements divided by 4 on my hip depth. My hip measurement is 40 inches. Divided by 4 is 10. So I went ahead to impute 10 inches. And I'm going to be connecting it to my waistline like so. So now moving on, whatever I have on my hip, I am going to go ahead and impute the same thing on my full length and on my hem. So I have 10 inches on my hip. I'm going to go ahead and impute it on my full length and on my hem. And I'm going to be connecting that with a straight ruler like so. And after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to add my sewing allowance, right? So I'm going to be adding my sewing allowance of 1.5 inches. So I'm going to come to my waist and mark 1.5 inches. I'm going to come to my hip and do the same thing as well. And I'm going to impute the 1.5 inch on my full length and on my hem line as well. I'm going to go ahead and connect the points like so, and I'm basically done with the front part of the skirt. And the next thing I'm going to do is to go ahead and cut it out. So please pay close attention to the part that I'm going to be cutting out. So after cutting it out, this is what it looks like. That is why I said we should have our pattern on fold, right? So the next thing I'm going to do now is to replicate my dart on the other part of the pattern paper that does not have the dart, right? So I'm just going to fold it over like so, and I'm going to pinch that 4-inch mark that we marked all the way down initially, and I'm going to give that part a notch, right? And after doing that, I'm just going to go ahead and slash my dart open like so. So just watch what I'm doing so you'd understand. And after cutting it out, this is what I have. So now I'm going to go ahead and set this aside, and we can start working on our back pattern. So our back pattern is basically the same thing as our front pattern. The only difference is the back pattern has a zipper allowance. It is very alike. It is the same thing. Matter of fact, you can use your front pattern to draft out your back pattern, but because this is a beginner friendly tutorial, I am going to be drafting the back pattern separately, right? So the first thing I went ahead to do was to mark out my zipper allowance of 1 inch, and I went ahead to label it. But I would advise you use 1.5 inches for your zipper allowance. When we get to the sewing part, you would understand why I said you should use 1.5 inch for your zipper allowance instead of 1 inch, right? So after doing that, the next thing I did was to draw out my starting line, and from my starting line I measured 1/2 inch downwards, just like I did for the front, 1/2 inch for the seam allowance to join the skirts to the band, right? So go ahead and draw your 1/2 inch like so. So moving on, the next thing I'm going to do now is to go ahead and impute my skirt length, and I placed my tape on the 1/2 inch after the starting line. I placed my tape at 1.5, just like you can see, and I marked my skirt length of 16 inches, and I'm going to go ahead and draw a straight line, right? And after doing that, I'm going to go ahead and measure 1 inch after my skirt length, which is going to serve as my hem. And after doing that, I'm going to go ahead and label the lines. So now the next thing I'm going to do is to take in my dart, right? So now the only difference when taking your dart for your front pattern and your back pattern is that when you're taking your dart for the back, you are going to start after the zipper allowance. Take note, take your dart after your zipper allowance, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and take my dart of 4 inches after my zipper allowance, and I'm going to draw a straight line. But for our back, our dart is not going to extend all the way to our hem, right? Our dart is going to be stopping at 4 inches. So that is me just marking 4 inches from the 1/2 inch after the starting line. I marked 4 inches down, and I marked 1/2 inch on both sides of the 4 inches that I measured initially, and I connected it, right? So there we have our dart for the back. So now the next thing we are going to do is to go ahead and input our waist and hip measurement, and it is basically just how we did it for the front part. So I'm going to come to my waist, and I'm going to input my waist measurement, right? But take note that all my measurements are starting after my zipper allowance, right? After that 1 inch I left for my zipper allowance. So I went ahead to input the 7 inches, and I replaced my 1 inch dart intake, right? So the next thing is to mark out my hip depth. So I'm going to place my tape at 1.5 inch on the 1/2 inch after the starting line, and I'm going to mark my hip depth of 9 inches. I'm going to go ahead to make a straight line, and I'm going to label that my hip depth. Then I'm going to go ahead and input my hip measurement of 10 inches, right? Then I'm going to do the same thing on my skirt length and on my hem as well, and I'm going to connect the point. And after doing that, I'm basically done with the back panel of the skirt. The next thing I'm going to do is to go ahead and add my sewing allowance of 1.5 inch. So I'm going to go ahead and have my sewing allowance of 1.5 inches on all the points, and I'm going to be connecting it with my ruler. So that is basically all for the back pattern, and we can go ahead to cut it out. So this is what the back panel looks like after cutting it out, right? So I'm going to bring back the front pattern so we can see what all the patterns look like. right? So this is what your patterns should look like after you are done, right? You are going to have 2 pieces for your front and a single piece for your back, but note that you are going to be cutting 2 pieces for your back when you are cutting on actual fabric. So with that being said, let's move on to cutting on the actual fabric. So this is the fabric I'm going to be using for this skirt, right? This is a crepe fabric, but take note that I'm going to be lining the skirt because I want the slit area to be as neat as possible, right? So I'm going to be lining the skirt. So this is basically me just pinning the back pattern to the fabric. We are going to be cutting the back pattern first, and I have my fabric on fold just like you can see. So go ahead and pin down your pattern, and you can just go ahead and cut it out following the pattern, right? So if you like this wrist pin cushion that you're seeing on my screen, I have a video on how I made it, and I'm going to be linking it in the description box below if you would like to make one for yourself. So just go ahead and cut out the skirt pattern as you can see me doing in the video, and we can move on to cutting our front pattern. So now this is our front pattern, right? So now cutting this front pattern is a bit technical because of your slit, right? This is where you determine where you want your slit to fall on. So I want my slit to fall on the left, right? So when I place my fabric on my cutting table, I am going to make sure the wrong part of the fabric is what is facing me, right? So now this is the wrong part of my fabric, and I'm going to go ahead and place my pattern paper on the wrong part of my fabric in a way that the part that I have my marker is showing on the front, right? Just like you can see, I'm going to place it like this. So at the end of the day, when I am done cutting, my slit is going to fall on the left. Now if you want your slit to fall on the right, you are just going to turn it over, just like you see me turning it over like this. And when you are done cutting, your slit is going to fall on the right. But I want my slit to fall on the left, so I am going to turn it this way where I have my marker facing me, and I'm going to cut it out, right? So now I am going to go ahead and pin it. Now if you are pinning your pattern to your fabric, make sure you leave at least 1 to 1.5 inches space in between your 2 patterns, right? Because we are going to be marking out half-inch sewing allowance to join the slit area together. So I'm going to go ahead and mark out half-inch sewing allowance like so on the dart area. I'm going to be doing that for both sides, and I'm going to go ahead and cut it out. So after cutting it out, this is what it looks like, right? So now if I go ahead and place this on my body, it is going to fall on my left side, right? So now I'm going to go ahead to cut the lining, right? So now when I'm cutting the lining, I am going to make sure the lining is shorter than my actual fabric by about 1 inch, right? Just look at what I'm doing. I'm pulling my actual fabric down in a way that I have a 1 inch difference between my actual fabric and the lining. So if you're a beginner and you are confused, just go ahead and cut the same length for your actual fabric and your lining, right? And when you are done, on the lower part of your lining, just measure out 1 inch and cut it away. It is still the same thing, right? So now I'm going to go ahead and move my fabric down, and I'm going to cut it out, and I'm going to be doing the same thing for all the other pieces as well. So this is what they are looking like after cutting it out. You can see the lining is 1 inch shorter than the actual fabric, and I have 2 pieces for the back and 1 piece each for the front part. So now the next thing I'm going to do now is to join the fabric and the lining together, right? You can see I went ahead to use my chalk to mark out the wrong side on this fabric because both the right side and the wrong side looks very alike, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to place the right side of my fabric like so, and I'm going to be placing my lining on it, right? I'm going to make sure the lower part aligns like this, and I have 1 inch space at the top, right? And I'm going to sew by 1/2 inch, right? So I'm going to do that for all the other pieces, and I'm going to come back to show you guys what it looks like. So this is what it looks like after sewing everything by 1/2 inch, right? So the next thing I'm going to do now is to go ahead and top stitch it. So I am going to open it up like so, and I am going to make sure the seam on the lower part falls on the lining area. As you can see, the seam is facing the lining area, right? And I'm going to be top stitching by about 1/4 inch, right? So I'm going to go ahead to my sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch all the piece, and I'm going to come back to show you guys what it looks like. So this is what all the piece looks like after top stitching, right? You can see how neat it looks, and this is what the wrong side is looking like, right? So I'm going to go ahead and set the front pieces aside so I can work on the back piece, right? So what I'm going to do now is I am going to take the back piece like so, and I am going to open it up to the wrong side, right? And I'm going to make sure the lining and the actual fabric aligns at the top, just like you can see me doing. And I'm going to run a straight stitch of about 1/2 inch on both sides, right? So I'm going to be doing the same thing for the other side as well. Then I'm going to come back to show you guys what it looks like. So after sewing it, this is what it looks like, right? And I'm going to go ahead and flip it over to the wrong side. I'm going to be using my scissors to push out the edges like so. So I'm going to take this to my ironing table and I'm going to iron it down so I can proceed on to the next step. So I've gone ahead to iron it, and this is what it looks like. I also went ahead to secure the top part by just running a straight stitch of about 1/2 inch on that part, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to place them on each other right side facing, and I'm going to be taking in my zipper allowance of 1 inch, right? So this is why I said you should leave 1.5 inch on your zipper allowance area, right? Because at the end of the day, after closing up that side by 1/2 inch, I'm still going to need 1 inch for my actual zipper allowance, which is going to amount to 1.5 inches at the end of the day. So after sewing it up and ironing, this is what it looks like, right? You can see how neat it looks inside out, right? So we're going to go ahead and set this aside, and we are going to start working on the front pattern, right? So now for my front pattern, I am going to be working on the slit area first, right? So I'm going to be turning it over to the wrong side like so, making sure the lining and the actual fabric aligns like so, right? Then I'm going to come to the hem and I'm going to measure 4 inches upward like so, right? And I am going to give that part a notch. So just watch what I'm trying to do very closely. As you can see, I already have my notch on the bigger piece, so I'm going to go ahead and notch the smaller piece as well. And please take note that we are doing all this on the wrong part of the fabric, right? So now I'm going to go ahead and make a straight stitch of 1/2 inch from that 4 inch point that I notched all the way down to my hem. And after sewing it down, this is what it looks like, right? So now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the right side like so. I'm going to be using my scissors to push out the pointy edge as well. And after doing that, now I'm going to go ahead to iron it down, then I'm going to come back to show you guys what it looks like. So this is what it looks like after ironing, right? Please, ironing is very important. Endeavor to iron as you sew, right? So the next thing I'm going to do now is I am going to open it up like so, and I am going to open the other part up as well, and I'm going to align the part where I stopped my stitch for my slit. I am going to align them together like so, making sure the stitches are facing each other, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to pin it down. After pinning it down, right, I'm going to go ahead and run a straight stitch from one end of the fabric to another, right? So just watch where I'm pointing at. I'm going to run a straight stitch like so. So I'm going to go ahead to my sewing machine and do that now. Then I'm going to come back to show you guys what it looks like. So I've gone ahead to sew it up, and this is what it looks like, right? And I am going to be turning it to the right side so you can understand what we just did. So this is what we just did, right? And if you look at the other side, you can see that the stitches is not showing on the wrong side. It is looking very neat. So this is what we were trying to achieve, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it over to the wrong side, and I'm going to be aligning the lining with the fabric, and I'm going to be sewing up the sides by 1/2 inch, just like we did for the back, right? And after doing that, this is what it looks like, right? I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the right side. I'll be using my scissors to push out the pointy edges, right? And after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do now is to go ahead and run a straight stitch to secure the top of the lining and the actual fabric together. And I'll take this to my ironing table and iron it down, and I'm going to come back to show you guys what it looks like. So after ironing it down, this is what it looks like, you guys. You can see how neat it is looking both on the right side and on the wrong side. So the next thing we are going to do now is to take in the darts, right? So I'm going to go ahead and fold the skirt into 2, and I'm going to be notching the midpoint like so, right? So now after notching, I'm going to open it up, and on the wrong side, right, I'm going to draw a straight line from that notch downwards like so. So now from that straight line, I'm going to take my darts measurement of 4 inches, right? So I'm going to form a straight line, and I'm going to measure my dart length of 4 inches, making sure that I'm measuring the 4 inches after the 1/2 inch sewing allowance to join the skirt to the band. That is, when you are measuring, make sure you leave 1/2 inch at the top of the skirt to join the skirt to the band, right? So we are going to be doing the same thing for the back as well, but for the back I am going to be using the zipper allowance area as the midpoint, right? So I'm going to come to the midpoint, and I am going to measure 4 inches outwards like so. I am going to create a straight line, and on that straight line I'm going to be taking my dart of 4 inches like so, right? And I'm going to be doing the same thing for the other side as well, right? And after doing that, I'm going to take this to my sewing machine, and I'm going to take in my dart. Then I'm going to transfer it to my ironing table, and I'm going to iron it. Then I'm going to come back to show you guys what it looks like. So this is what it looks like, you guys. As you can see, I've gone ahead to iron the dart, and it is laying really flat, right? So the next thing I'm going to do now is to sew up the sides of the skirt by 1 inch sewing allowance. I'm using 1 inch because if you remember, we took in 1/2 inch on both sides when we were closing up the side for the skirt, which is going to leave us with 1 inch, right? So now if you look at the skirt now, you would notice that the back part is looking smaller compared to the front part, right? The sides are not aligning, right? This is because I took in 1/2 inch to close up my zipper allowance area, right? And after I was done closing it up, I took in 1 inch as my zipper allowance, which is 1.5 inches altogether. This is why I was saying you should use 1.5 inch as your zipper allowance instead of 1 inch, so you will not run short of fabric, right? So now I'm going to go ahead and pin the front part to the back part, making sure that the notch area in the front part and the zipper allowance area of the back aligns, right? I'm going to go ahead and pin the sides as well. Then I'm going to go ahead and input my measurement. So now, using my zipper allowance as a guide, I am going to go ahead and input my waist measurement of 7 inches, and I am going to mark out my hip depth just like we did when we were drafting our pattern. And I'm going to input my hip measurement as well, so you know that whatever we have on our hip is the same thing we have on our hem. So just go ahead and input the same thing you have on your hip on your hem, and I'm going to go ahead and curve it like so, right? So I'm going to be repeating the same thing on the other side as well, right? And after doing that, I'm going to go over to my sewing machine, and I am going to sew up the sides, right? Then I'm going to move on to my ironing table, and I'm going to give it a good press. Then I'm going to come back to show you guys what it looks like. So after sewing and ironing it, this is what it looks like, right? You can see how neat it is looking, and all the seams are laying flat, right? So now the next thing we are going to do is to go ahead and fix our band, right? And to do that, I'm going to open up my zipper allowance area like so. So I've gone ahead to open it up, right? And I'm going to be taking my waist measurement all around like so, starting from my zipper allowance area, right? And after measuring, I had 30.5 inches, right? So I'm going to go ahead to add 5 more inches to that 30.5 30.5, so I'm going to be cutting out a band of 35.5 inches, right? So here is the band, right? The width of the band is 4 inches and the length, like I said earlier, is 35.5 inches, right? So you can go ahead to iron interfacing on the wrong side of your band. Please iron interfacing on the wrong side of your band and fold in 1/2 inch on one edge. This will make it very easy for you when you are flipping your band over to the right side. Okay, so this is me just marking out the wrong part on my fabric, so I would know the wrong part, right? So what I'm going to do now is I am going to turn my skirt to the wrong side, like so, because we are going to be sewing this band from the wrong side and we are going to be turning it over to the right side, like so, right? So I'm going to be placing the right side of my band on my zipper allowance area, like so, making sure I leave out about 1 inch to fold the band to the back, like so. I hope you can see what I'm doing, right? So I'm going to take this to my sewing machine now and I'm going to run a straight stitch of 1/2 inch all round to the other side. And when I get to the other end of my zipper allowance area, I am going to mark 1 inch also, and I am going to cut out the excess, right? So I'm going to fold that 1 inch over my zipper allowance area, just like I did for the other side. And after doing that, I'm going to turn the skirt over to the right side and I am going to flip the 1 inch in and fold in 1/2 inch at the top of the band, like so, and I am going to run a straight stitch all the way down. This was why I said you should iron interfacing and fold in 1/2 inch on one edge of the band, so it is not going to stress you when you are turning it over, like so, right? So I'm basically done fixing the band and you can see how neat it is looking. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a good press and I'm going to come back to show you guys what it looks like. So you can see where I said you should iron interfacing on your band before fixing it, so you will not have all this fold at the end of the day. But I've gone ahead to iron it and this is what we have. I'm also going to go ahead and measure 8 inches downwards for my zipper and I'm going to fix my zipper. You can see how neat it is looking both inside out, right? I'm going to go ahead and fix my zipper now and I'm going to come back to show you guys how it looks on me. So this is how the skirt looks like on me. I really love the outcome. The only thing I would have changed is to make the length a little bit longer, probably like 17 or 18 inches, right? But all the same, I really love the outcome. And if you like this video, please do well to give this video a thumbs up, like and share, and also drop your comments down below. And if you've not subscribed to the channel, please click on the subscribe button and also don't forget to turn on post notifications so you get notified whenever I post a new video. And if you have any questions, I am going to be in the comment section. So see you next time. Bye.